This is the Chris DeGaulle Show podcast.
Okay, guys, let's just rip. And Chris DeGaulle.
Chris DeGaulle. Chris, thanks for being with me tonight.
Chris DeGaulle.
I'm joined now by Chris DeGaulle.
Now, he puts the broad in broadband. It's Chris DeGaulle.
The Chris DeGaulle podcast is presented by usmedicalplan.com. Save big money monthly and get better health coverage at usmedicalplan.com.
Middle of the week, it's Wednesday, the 29th day of November. Thanks a lot for downloading the Chris DeGaulle Show podcast. Coming up today, my great friend Mark Weaver will be with us. Hunter Biden says, I'll come to Capitol Hill and I'll testify, but I want to do it in public for everybody to see. But James Comer, the House Oversight Committee, said, no, we're going to do it behind closed doors. Hunter says, nope, I want to do it publicly. So what's the dispute about there exactly? Also, I want to revisit, and I don't mean to bore you. I know that sometimes this gets boring. I'm not doing it to be boring. I'm doing it because I think it's important. The assumption that Donald Trump is going away to prison and that it's a lock. And maybe you've already kind of assumed that in your own head. Maybe you've heard people say that. Maybe you're thinking that. Time to move on from Trump because he's definitely going to jail. Well, Mark and I kind of parsed that a little bit. There's some analysis from Jonathan Turley that I think is really smart about why, as a Democrat, he says, don't be so sure about that. So I want to unpack that a little bit. Also, Nikki Haley, the rise of Nikki Haley. I don't know how many of you in this audience are fans of hers. It's okay if you are. She picked up a massive endorsement yesterday. Massive, actually. I mean, a really sizable chunk of money. This is very, very interesting news for the Republican primary. And there's a big internecine battle in Iowa, the first in the nation primary. So we'll unpack some of that news. My friend Cheryl Chumley is with us, too. There is a massive operation, as per usual with this administration, to go after social media that allows young people, or anybody for that matter, to start sharing the sentiment that the economy isn't great like they say it is. Not making it up, the Biden administration, along with their willing accomplices of the Washington Post, say that social media is becoming a dangerous problem because it's allowing people like you and me to get on it and tell other people and make viral messages that say the economy sucks. And as you know, they think the economy's great, and you should too. And yet we're the threat to democracy. So we'll talk with Cheryl about that, as well as the COVID shot. Oh, it turns out now natural immunity works. So she's great, and we'll speak with her about that. And more. There's much more, but don't go anywhere. Do know this. John Ruhlman, our title sponsor at usmedicalplan.com. It's that time of year where people are signing up again for health insurance plans, and if you're one of those, if you're shopping and you're thinking, my gosh, every month, thousands of dollars I'm paying in health insurance premiums for my small business employees or my family because I buy it out of pocket. I know. I get it, how expensive it is. And unless you have a group insurance plan, costs are through the roof. Well, the good news is there are like 80 different private health insurance companies that John Ruhlman and his team at usmedicalplan.com work with. And if you call him today and or log on today and get connected that way and just say, hey, Chris, I hear Chris talking about you guys all the time. You may talk to John, you may talk to one of his associates, but they'll all take great care of you. Just say, I was listening to Stegall's podcast. I want to run my insurance premium plan by you, and you tell me if you think you can do better than what I'm paying every month for the coverage that I get. What will surprise you is the answer is most likely going to be yes, and the money you're going to save may knock you on the floor. What a great time of the year to save a little added money, right? You won't know. You won't know if you get better coverage, cheaper rates. I have friends, personal associates that have saved anywhere from a few $100 to a couple $1,000 a month. That's in their pocket because they reached out to John Ruhlman. usmedicalplan.com or call 877-410-4321. 877-410-4321. It's really quite something. And some of the polls, I might have to eat my hat here. I was making fun of Sean Spicer last month, who said he thinks Nikki Haley could take second in Iowa. And I said, there's no way. I will eat my hat. I'll take you to a steak dinner if Nikki Haley places second. Now, I believe, much like I told you yesterday, with the Joe Biden's in real trouble polls, I'll believe it when I see it. I'll also believe it when I see it that Nikki Haley is second in Iowa. But boy, they are trying hard to sell you on that fact. All of the establishment is coming out in full force. They have apparently thrown DeSantis overboard. And Nikki Haley is, in fact, the confirmed belle of the ball, and this is probably the biggest evidence of it to date. The Republican establishment is hell-bent to make Nikki Haley the option to Trump. And in securing this super PAC, this Americans for Prosperity, we've talked with Americans for Prosperity people in the past. I don't object to them in any way. But they come out yesterday in a letter addressed to grassroots leaders, activists, and interested parties that Americans for Prosperity Action says it's throwing its support behind South Carolina Governor and former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, said she is best positioned to beat former President Donald Trump in the primary election and President Biden in the general. The statement says the party has been, quote, choosing bad candidates who are going against America's core principles, and that Democrats are responding with calls of extreme politics. Now, am I to take this to mean that Americans for Prosperity thinks Ron DeSantis is, quote, a bad candidate who goes against America's core principles, Fast Eddie? Americans for Prosperity?
That was it, yeah.
Bad candidates who are going against America's core principles. I'm sure the Ron DeSantis, I know this because I was watching it yesterday. I don't know if you get as politically geeked out as I do, but I've been watching this with great fascination. There's always some friendly fire during Republican primaries. I've never seen it quite so nasty, and now it's gotten third tier nasty because this Nikki Haley last-minute push from a lot of establishment Republicans who have declared Ron DeSantis isn't a great pick either, or not the winning horse, or can't beat Trump, or whatever. They've abandoned him. So this, imagine if you're a DeSantis enthusiast now, and you have made your entire life's work getting Ron DeSantis the Republican nomination and victory in Iowa. What do? Now you have Donald Trump, which has been an omnipresent threat, and now this. Establishment Republicans saying, sorry, Ron, you can't get it done. Nikki's our gal. We're going with her. What do? I've seen, I know a lot of you may not know or care about the intra-party play in Iowa, but there are a couple of people, one of whom has been a guest on the show, who are personally, deeply committed to their word and their endorsement. And when they endorse, one of them's a colleague. I'm not going to name names because it doesn't matter. But these people are, it's very clear, personally invested in their candidate, in this case, Ron DeSantis winning. And anyone who is not pro-DeSantis in their case, they take great umbrage. In fact, there's almost some sort of moral assault on their sensibilities if you don't see it their way. Now, I know I can hear you, DeSantis people, saying, what, you don't think the Trump people are behaving the same? They are. Of course, you've got idiots like Laura Loomer, and she's a stone-cold idiot, folks. I don't want anything to do with that woman. She's a lunatic. Don't tell me she's great. She's not. She's repellent. She's a cancer, and she needs to go away. But you've got people like Laura Loomer and others advocating for Trump and saying the most outrageous, disproven, uncredible, ridiculous things in an attempt to try to discredit Ron DeSantis. And I got to tell you, those people have got their hands full because all the establishment money, the big money, has now apparently decided here in this 11th hour, Nikki Haley can get the job done. And I saw some polls yesterday that suggest she may, in fact, be moving into second place in Iowa. And I, much as I hate to admit it, may have to buy Sean Spicer a steak. Fast Eddie. This may be real. This may actually be happening. Money might just be able to buy you popularity in Iowa. Now, again, back to these guys. One of them is a religious guy I've never had on, and I say religious guy not to be not denouncing him or attacking him for that. I'm just saying his name is Bob Vander Plaats. Everyone in Iowa has a Dutch name. Almost everyone. Vander Hoeven, Vander Veen, Van Van, Van de Vin, Van de Van. They're all Dutch in Iowa. It's weird. I know. My mother's from there. And Bob Vander Plaats is a big faith-based mover and shaker there. And he and a colleague of mine are attached at the hip. And every caucus cycle, they come out and they declare who they believe to be the best candidate. And they've been telling themselves for a long time, Fast Eddie, this is always a cautionary tale in our business. When you start to believe your own press, as they say, when you start to convince yourself that your very words on a microphone will move millions of people to swerve one direction or the other, you start to tell yourself that, you get into a very dangerous place. And I think these gentlemen have gotten themselves into a very dangerous place. And now they've started locking horns with people like our friend Julie Kelly. Julie's been digging around in financial records and trying to watch the financial transactions of DeSantis and where the money's been going. And this Vanderplatz guy has now come out and endorsed DeSantis. And Julie's been intimating, what, did he buy your endorsement, Bob? And, of course, that's made my colleague mad. And so I'm just telling you, in Iowa, folks, it is the OK Corral. You may not know it. It may not make the news every day. But you should know this First in the Nation primary coming up in January is starting to become a Republican bloodbath. And I don't know what comes out of it. It'll pass. But where's your money right now, Fast Eddie? Given what I've just laid out, where's your money? Because there are a couple of guys in Iowa who every time, a presidential election cycle comes around, they say, well, I've endorsed so-and-so. Ergo, Iowa will go my way. It doesn't appear to be going that way for these people that tell themselves they're big shots in Iowa, and now they're getting mad, and they're starting to lash out at anybody who doesn't see it their way. And listen, take it from me. If there's anything I've learned the hard way, it is when you don't see things the way the voting public and a large swath of your audience doesn't see it, you're best served to step back and assess what's going on and what's gone wrong, and why you don't see it the way they do. But they don't, and I know this because I went through this. I told you, and those of you who have been longtime listeners know, I was so full of myself back in 2015 and 16. I had the temerity to openly challenge Rush Limbaugh. That's how full of myself I was. So sure Ted Cruz should have been the nominee, Fast Eddie. So certain. Beyond a shadow of a doubt. I said Rush Limbaugh had lost his way. He'd lost his mind. For 30 years, I'd been learning about conservatism from him. For some reason, I don't know if it's his personal relationship with Trump he can't see past. I don't know what it is. But now he's telling me that a Hollywood Democrat who's always voted Democrat is now the better choice to lead the Republican Party than this constitutional conservative called Ted Cruz. I refused to believe it. And I openly, hostily said anybody who saw it any other way was a stone-cold moron. And I said that all the way to the Pennsylvania primary, Fast Eddie.
Chris, I might say something controversial here. What if Iowa, sadly, just isn't that important? Because Ted Cruz won Iowa in 2016. That everybody thought at that point, it's like, okay, it's over for Trump now.
That's right.
And it wasn't.
No, it was not. You're exactly right. Iowa may be slipping in its stature, but I think, look, unless something really dramatic happens that I don't see or understand, it doesn't appear to me that Donald Trump is going to lose Iowa. I mean, our friend Matthew Whitaker, who's there on the ground, former acting attorney general, he says, I don't think it's close. I mean, he's pretty confident that in January Trump wins it. But you're right. I mean, keeping with that scenario, even if Trump wins Iowa, does that mean that the others couldn't come from behind out there and surprise us? I don't know, Nikki Haley show up strong in South Carolina, do better in New Hampshire than we imagine? Maybe. Look, anything could happen. It's just, I said this yesterday, and I think it a little unfortunate, and I don't say it with great sanctimony because I fell victim to it once myself. When you start to assume, because you have a platform, that makes you the smartest guy in the room, you're making a terrible mistake. And I have some colleagues and friends who think because they have large social media audiences or because they have a microphone, by decree, their point of view must be adopted by the entirety of the Republican voting bloc. And it's not happening that way for some of my friends, and it's really frustrating them. and they're starting to lash out in ways that I guess I understand because maybe I was there however long ago that was, 2015 and 16. Maybe I was there once. Maybe that was me. But here's what I did. I pulled back and said, okay, I've clearly gotten it wrong. This is embarrassing. I wrote an open editorial about how Trump was the destruction of the Republican Party and the worst thing ever and blah, blah, blah. I'm wrong. And for years, I've had to step back and say, I didn't. There was something about Donald Trump that resonated with you folks that I don't see and I don't appreciate and I didn't understand. And maybe that is because I spend too much time in a radio studio and not enough time just hanging out with people who live their lives day to day and vote. Maybe I'm too just isolated in these four walls. I mean, I spend a fair amount of time talking with people, and I talk with a lot of callers and people that contact the show through social media. I always assumed I pretty well understood where people were. I didn't understand the Trump phenomenon. Didn't. Took me a long time to figure it out. I do now. I really do now, sincerely. And I feel it more in my core than ever before because I know how the country's being ruined. I was late to the party on Trump, and the reason is I didn't believe things were as bad as they are then. I didn't used to be able to tell myself things like, there's not a dime's worth of, people used to say to me, there's not a dime's worth of difference between Republicans and Democrats. And I would say, oh, now that's not true. That's just stupid. That's ridiculous. And I try to tell you all the reasons why. Listen, in 2023, can I sit here and tell you that I think that there is a demonstrable difference between the Republican leadership and the Democrat leadership? Not a ton. Not a ton. What, maybe on tax policy? But not much else. Not the things that matter to you and me. Border security. Stop throwing our, chasing good money after bad in places like Ukraine. They don't care. They ignore you. They continue to spend, limitless spending. Yeah, fair to say Trump was part of that. That's not unfair to say. Trump was never a fiscal conservative. That's true. But one thing Trump was, he understood the danger of China. He understood the danger of a wide open border. He believed in national sovereignty. Make America great again. MAGA, which is used as a pejorative today by the left, is a real thing that you and I still believe. And that rage in January 6th was real and it was organic because you knew and I knew what we were watching was the country being stolen away by people who mean it harm, by establishment figures who want at all costs to stay in control, the Liz Cheney types, the Dick Cheney types, the Mitch McConnell types. They do not want to hand the country over to we the people. They don't want a representative republic. They think you're a moron. Said another way, many of the elected leadership in Washington, D.C., and those that run the Republican Party suffer from something that I used to, and many of my colleagues still do. I know better than you. I've been elected. I hold the power in office. I have a microphone. I know better than you. And the people have this funny way to continue to remind those with that attitude, no, you don't. And we're coming. And it stymies them. So I actually feel sorry for the Americans for Prosperity people today and this Koch brothers backpack. We've worked with AFP in the past. I have nothing against them. But I don't know what kind of transaction this is. I've never seen such a spectacular amount of money lit on fire in my life as our friends from Americans for Prosperity. This is throwing good money after bad. It's not going to work out for them. Much like it's not going to, I suspect, I'm not making predictions here, but I suspect that many people who have their emotions so wrapped up in DeSantis' victory over Trump, they're prepared to castigate anybody who doesn't see it their way. Similarly with the Trump people, to be fair and to be clear, I think Trump people who attack DeSantis are straight up stone cold morons. Attacking Ron DeSantis it's folly, it's unwarranted, it's unfair, it's stupid, it's ridiculous. Ron DeSantis is the finest governor in the United States today. It's not even close. It's not even debatable. He has been one of the most effective, stone-cold, stalwart defenders of conservatism any state's governor has ever exemplified. He would make a fine Republican nominee. Now, if the Republican base decides that Trump is still their guy, and it appears from polls they do, so be it. But to attack Ron DeSantis it's silly. I mean, the way people are making it so personal. But enter this third wrinkle now. I predicted it after that, second debate. I said they're going to try to make her a thing, and they are now. They're trying to convince you that Nikki Haley's a thing, so much so that the biggest players in Republican money are trying to make the push that she's the new horse. Although Chris Christie wants you to know he's still out there. Chris Christie was traveling around on CNN and MSNBC yesterday. Kid you not. He made while the rest of these people are in Iowa, actually working, shaking hands, door knocking, raising money, Chris Christie just decides to go on cable news because this is really what it's all about for him. He is the personification of a guy who's trying to dine out on television. He draws a salary from ABC News as a regular pundit there. Chris Christie's entire existence is trying to run a media campaign. He has no interest in campaigning on the ground. Here was some of his stop yesterday on cable.
Trump's voters in New Hampshire said they are open to changing their minds between now and primary day on January 23rd. So, I know everybody wants to make this race over now, but it's not over, and it's not even close to over. And when you look at the history, forget about predictions. Let's look at what's happened over time. Mm-hmm. And what's happened tells you that there's a long way to go here, and I like the fact that we're gaining momentum now.
Yeah, gaining momentum now. Speaking of Chris Christie, I had a piece actually from the weekend authored by Jonathan Turley. Christie has been predicting that Donald Trump will be in jail by spring break. I don't know if you've heard him saying that. And there are a fair number of you who believe Donald Trump is headed for prison. And by the way, this is where I know that a lot of you disagree with me. But I say the reason my emotional investment is in seeing Donald Trump the nominee is for that very reason. This threat that he's going to be thrown in prison. For what exactly? For what? I told you this yesterday. We've never been here as a nation. I don't know how any Republican can stand by and say this is acceptable. I don't know how a guy who claims to be a Republican can go on TV and say things confidently, like almost proudly. Oh, Donald Trump will end up in prison before spring break. Jonathan Turley, who's not a Republican, he's a Democrat. He voted for Hillary Clinton. Said, while Chris Christie declares it's over for Trump and predicts that Trump would be convicted and imprisoned by spring, he was specifically referring to prosecutors linked to the 2020 election denial in Atlanta and D.C. However, Yogi Berra would likely caution that in baseball and litigation, it ain't over till it's over. Trump's greatest threat of conviction, Turley says, is in Florida on the documents thing. Remember, that's not even being discussed anymore. Everybody's so singularly obsessed with Jack Smith in D.C. and Fannie in Georgia. The raid on the former president's home is completely forgotten for some reason. And Turley says if you really want to sweat something, in his view, that's the one Trump should be sweating. Nobody's talking about it. By the way, I don't agree with Turley on that, but whatever. Anyway, he says that the judge in that case, that's that Trump-appointed judge, the Florida lady, who probably is going to push it. I don't know if she set the trial date yet, but she's expected to soon, and a lot of people suggest that she's going to push it till after the election. So that leaves the two cases. Joe Biden's case, facing his own charges, not facing charges that should be, of mishandling classified documents, which would make a Trump political rallying cry, correctly or not, that he's being treated differently. So that leaves the two cases surrounding the 2020 election, writes Turley. In Georgia, a slew of former lawyers are taking pleas with promises to testify if called. This is something that I regret I didn't spend enough time on. When you started hearing about these plea deals from people like Sidney Powell and Jenna Ellis and others, people panicked and said, oh, that means Trump is cooked. They're going to talk. Turley sees this differently, and I wanted to call your attention to this. For those of you convinced Trump's going to prison, and that's why you can't support him as the primary candidate. Some of their depositions have been leaked. Sidney Powell and Jenna Ellis, as you know. And that's much to the dismay of old Fannie, the prosecutor in Georgia. She has reason to be alarmed because some of these leaked interviews hit hard at the weakest link in her conspiracy case. For instance, Sidney Powell stated Trump clearly believed he had won the election when he was challenging the results in the courts and Congress. Powell pleaded to misdemeanors for a deal that avoids jail time and preserves her ability to resume her practice of law. She notably, however, did not, as lunatic as I think Sidney Powell is, release the Kraken. Turley points out, in her defense, in Trump's defense, she did not plead guilty to racketeering charges. Fast Eddie, you know what that is, right? This is what old Fannie down there in Georgia is trying to suggest is that Trump and his attorneys colluded in what they knew was fraudulent activity to overturn an election, when in fact, all these people who were rounded up and mugshotted and copped pleas so they could avoid prison, what they're all saying in these depositions is Trump really believed that he had won Georgia. He really did believe it. And we told him to believe it. And that's the ball game. Turley's entire point is these people have not backed off. It's not like they're not turning a plea deal and saying, okay, you got us. I'll hand over all the documents and the recordings that say we had multiple conversations in which Trump knew he didn't win and we knew he didn't win, and Trump kept ordering us to do things that we knew was fruitless. That's not what happened. What they're all saying is Trump was given information and Trump believed it was worth pursuing. And by the way, let's not miss the forest for the trees here. It is not illegal to challenge the outcomes of debates and elections, I should say. If it were, Al Gore should be in prison. Hillary Clinton should be in prison. Stacey Abrams should be in prison. Those people still believe today they rightly won their elections. It is not illegal to challenge elections in this country. And none of these people who've copped pleas in Georgia, much to Fannie's dismay, as Jonathan Turley points out, are suggesting that this was a plot and that Trump knew he really lost, wink, but he wanted him to go forward with a chaos operation anyway. So this supplies the key defense for Trump, says Turley. They believed assurances from counsel that he had a case to make in challenging the election. So Turley says to people like Christie, and those of you who say Trump's too dangerous, he's not worth it, he's going to prison, it's a lock. Turley says, don't be so sure. And again, he's a Hillary Clinton voting Democrat. Hey there, it's Chris, back on the phone with my dentist and friend Bob Spinato at Williamsburg Dental in Broomall, Pennsylvania, just off the Blue Route with new technology. You have not just new associates, but they brought new technology into the business to make it a little easier for patients.
Yeah, it's a very exciting time in dentistry. We have now introduced a three-dimensional x-ray called a CBCT scan in our office, which allows us to diagnose and things earlier for patients. My daughter is placing a lot of implants in the past had referred out. It's now being done in-house. And we also, we've been using dental or computer scanners for taking impressions for crowns for about the last 2 to 3 years. We now have introduced the next step, which is a milling machine, and we can now make crowns in the office. Things can be completed in the same day as opposed to having a temporary crown put on and 3 weeks later coming back and having a permanent crown put on. It's really a game changer, and it's a time saver for our patients to not have to make multiple visits to the office.
Pick up the phone or go online, make that appointment, 610-353-2700 or williamsburg-dental.com. From the Washington Post, headline, the viral $16 McDonald's meal that may explain voter anger at Biden. You heard about this? December 20th, 2022, Topher Olive went to a McDonald's in the town of Post Falls, Idaho, ordered a limited edition smoky double quarter pounder BLT with fries and a Sprite. The meal cost $16.10. He posted that receipt on TikTok. And even though he'd ordered a novelty item, Olive's video about a $16 McDonald's order went viral, racking up hundreds of thousands of views. After a McDonald's revenue report came out recently, that same post went viral again this month. At least a half a dozen news outlets picked up on it. So this is a year-old story. It went viral again, and news media started reporting on it like it's new. Not new, but the New York Post, the Washington Examiner, Newsmax among them, picking up the story that Olive's Pricey Petty on YouTube, a video with 2 million views, describes it as a Big Mac meal that costs $16. So the Washington Post is doing everything they can here to discredit the legitimacy of this man's complaint that this was a $16 meal. No. Things aren't that bad. This was a novelty item. By the way, it's a year-old story. And yet, the Washington Post has to acknowledge administration officials with the Biden administration deserve more credit. He deserves more credit for his accomplishments. But Americans won't give Biden that credit for those accomplishments if the president and his allies don't talk about them. This is just like Pepe Le Pew yesterday. Asked, so when people are sitting around their Thanksgiving table and they're not feeling it, well, I don't care how they feel. My data says it's great.
Lowering prices, you said earlier that the actions the president has taken have worked. So is it your sense that when people were home for Thanksgiving, catching up with their family members, they were saying to each other, can you believe how much more affordable things have gotten?
So honestly, I wouldn't, I hear the question, but I want to make sure this is very clear. We take that very seriously.
Yeah, we think you're full of it, but
families, the decisions that they make at their kitchen table, whether it's during Thanksgiving or whether it is every month as they're trying to make hard decisions about how they move forward with taking care of their family, we take that very seriously. It's not a joke to us. It is important to us. This is the president who talks about it in a very personal way when he talks about what families have to go through, working families, middle-class families, and that's why he's taking actions that he has. And so, look, the fact is, the data shows that the economy is improving.
Now,
the
folks,
data shows that
yes, the data points show. I've got the data. I got the data. We understand how people feel, but we have the data. This is the same kind of story. The Washington Post is going into spin mode. You know, the Biden administration's really got to get out there and keep talking about the data, how things are better than everybody feels. This TikTok video is a year old. People are calling it a Big Mac meal. It's actually a novelty item. This is not. But, and here, interestingly, one of the co-authors of this piece is Taylor Lorenz. Do you remember who that was, Fast Eddie?
Oh, how could I forget? Yes. Yeah. The doxing queen.
That's right. It won't surprise you that this woman, who was it she doxed exactly? I forgot now, though.
She was the one who doxed libs of TikTok.
That's
so Chaya
right.
Rutkin.
That's right.
Yeah.
Libs of TikTok. She continues her crusade. That's what this piece is ultimately about. This went viral amongst young people on TikTok. This $16 meal went viral on TikTok. It got picked up again a year later because it went viral on TikTok again. And Taylor Lorenz and her colleagues at the Washington Post, again, are saying, we have to do something about TikTok. We got to do something about this perception. Because didn't you hear Pepe Le Pew? People's perception isn't reality. So I don't know where these people are feeling like they're struggling. TikTok may tell them they're struggling, but it's just not true. Brian Hanley, CEO of Bullish Studio, a financial media company that works with content creators, said it's going to be difficult for Biden to overcome this narrative no matter how many charts and numbers his aides provide. We live in a reply guy world, and dunking on people, including the president, is what's going to get even more engagement, and more engagement equals more money, says Hanley. And some economists, now listen to this, again, this is from Taylor Lorenz at the Washington Post, economists think these kinds of comments are not just wrong, but what's the word? What is the word the left uses for speech they don't like? They call speech they don't like
misinformation?
More aggressive. They're more if they don't agree with you, the fastest way to silence you is to call your speech
hate speech.
Hate's good or dangerous. Dangerous is the word. she's done it again here. This is dangerous. I want you to really back up and listen to me now. Slow down and listen to me. Listen close. The Washington Post says it is dangerous to suggest the economy is struggling. See? So it's not just COVID. It's not just the border. It's not just greenhouse gases. It's the economy. If your perception, you hear me? Listen, this is really important. If your perception of this economy is anything less than what Pepe Le Pew and Joe Biden and the White House says it is, which is great. If your perception of this economy is anything less than great and you say so out loud, that is dangerous speech. White House officials say the administration is working with TikTok creators to tell positive stories of Biden's economic stewardship, while also working with social media platforms to counter misinformation that we all know is very dangerous. The media ecosystem has warped people's views, they write, particularly given how hard it is to assess nationwide economic conditions from one's own personal experience. So you see, Fast Eddie, if I post something about how I'm struggling economically and it goes viral, well, people are just promoting little old Chris DeGaule's point of view. That's not necessarily the sum total of the United States attitude or opinion of the economy. My particular content has gone viral because I did it well to get attention, but it may not actually reflect what most people feel. Thus, it could be dangerous. You see this game?
Oh, yeah.
It's newspeak. Folks, this is the fascism. This is the totalitarianism that they accuse us of. This is so important. Man, if there's nothing else you take from living through this era, take this and understand it and teach it to other people who aren't eyes wide open about it. We're in an era now where if people share their feelings on social media and it does not comport with the current Biden administration, they will sit down with social media creators and social media platforms and say, we got to do something about this. You're allowing these people to continue messaging and spreading a viral message out there that doesn't comport with what we know to be true. You guys have got to do something about this. You're allowing people to spread dangerous misinformation about elections, greenhouse gases, the economy, the border. Said another way, this is a Washington Post piece, yet again, promoting government administrative censorship of your voice and mine on social media platforms. Anything that doesn't agree with the statist's point of view is dangerous speech that must be dealt with. Even now about matters related to the economy. If you're not smiling and saying, gosh, I'm thankful Joe Biden is president because, gee golly, the economy's never been rip-roaring like it is right now. Man, am I happy. Never have I had more disposable income. Never have things been more affordable. I am so glad Joe Biden is president. And if everyone isn't saying that, smiling like it's Pleasantville on social media, we need to have a sit-down with social media companies. Why are you allowing these people, these malcontents, to complain about the economy? That's spreading out there. People are sharing that. They're hearing. What is this? Where are we? Is this North Korea, Fast Eddie? Do we live in Is this Russia, Danny? Do we live in Russia? Caddyshack line. I swear to you, is Kim Jong-un our leader? And I missed it? Washington Post grudgingly, other issues feed economic frustration. Oh, I didn't know there were economic issues. High interest rates that have put the dream of home ownership out of reach of millions, rising rents for everyone else, persistently high grocery prices, among other factors. I don't even know why the Washington Post put that in there. They just spent 2 pages, 2 columns telling me the economy was great and that this viral guy on TikTok is misleading millions of people who have shared this sentiment. That it was dangerous to even share the misinformation. There's a cadre of number-crunching paperwork obsessives who are convinced that if some report says inflation is slowing, that means everyone is great, and everybody who feels something different is either lying or brainwashed on TikTok, said a content creator and progressive activist. Actually being honest here for a minute. He said the idea that people are just making stuff up or are misled about their own material conditions is absurd. This is a progressive saying this in the Washington Post. A progressive TikToker is saying, are you accusing me of lying that the economy sucks? Is that what you're suggesting? This is a young progressive on TikTok, Fast Eddie. I mean, I credit the Washington Post for even including his quote, because this is largely a propaganda piece about how you need to get your mind right. The economy's great. Didn't you hear Pepe Le Pew? She said, our data shows, I know how you feel. I'm real sensitive to how you feel, but you're a moron. It's not true. You should stop lying. Things are great. Zaid Amandi, a content creator with 400,000 followers, posts about finance and economic topics, said people are increasingly learning about financial concepts on TikTok, and that many have a very negative view of the country's economic outlook. People feel a sense of dread. And the Washington Post and the Biden administration's official point of view is that's made up. That's all made up. It's manufactured. It is viral lies that are allowed to spread, just like peddling election disinformation was not allowed. Just like the Hunter Biden laptop wasn't allowed. Dangerous Russian propaganda. Talking down our economy is dangerous propaganda. Questioning the integrity of the elections, dangerous propaganda. Noticing a running theme. So Joe Biden and the Washington Post working in concert yet again to bully social media users to stop spreading lies about their economic struggles. It is great out there, damn it. Now buck up and smile and tell everyone you know in a viral post the economy is great. Go! Folks. This is dangerous. This is the real danger. These people are the real threat to democracy. Every idiotic show that you see on MSNBC and CNN talking about Trump and the threat to democracy. Folks, what I just shared with you is a threat to democracy. When administration officials and their state-sanctioned media are now going after people on social media simply for saying the economy sucks and go viral because their message is effective, you noticing a theme? They're getting really tired of social media amplifying your platform, your voice. They're giving more people like you the opportunity to say aloud what everybody feels and then share it. And then it becomes the prevailing view. I'm not alone. I feel that way, which is why they've hated people like me and shows like mine for all the years I've done it. It's why they've gone after things like the fairness doctrine over the years. They cannot stand voices like ours amplified in any way. It started by going after talk radio forever ago. It bears repeating. It is no surprise today that they're targeting social media because voices like yours are being amplified. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Everyone must smile. Smiles, everyone. Fantasy Island. We are all happy. We are all wealthy. Joe Biden is president, and we all feel great about it. Our healthy, robust, strong president makes country great and rich. Merry Christmas. We are all happy. Who's the totalitarian? What's the threat to democracy there? Trump? What in that equation is Trump? What in that equation is MAGA? None of it. That's your threat to democracy. While they scream and point at Trump and you and me and people who vote for their opposition, while they scream and point at us that we're the threat, look what they're doing. They're holding Mafia Don-style meetings with social media companies and saying, you'd better stop these people from spreading these lies about the state of the economy on your social media platforms. They're lies. They're dangerous, you know. And the election, you'd better stop them. That's the threat to democracy, and don't you ever forget it, and don't you ever let anybody tell you that Trump or conservatism is a threat to democracy. Wide open borders are a threat to democracy. Flooding our country with illegals who would vote is a threat to our democracy. And certainly silencing voices, American voices, challenging authority, that's a threat to democracy every time. Look how they're treating RFK Jr. Not a guy I support, not a guy I'd vote for, but a threat, a challenge to their power. Look how they're treating him. Look how they treated Tulsi Gabbard. Look how they treated Bernie Sanders. This isn't exclusive to conservatives, by the way. You liberals should know, too. Some of your great liberal heroes that have tried to rise up and speak, look at how they're being censored, shouted down, silenced, and attacked. That's your threat to democracy. Don't you ever tell me Trump is a threat to democracy. In this Deadspin story about the kid at the Chiefs-Raiders game last Sunday, Fast Eddie, have you seen this thing going around? Deadspin, left-wing, do they do exclusively sports at Deadspin? Not exclusively, I guess.
I thought they were exclusively sports. Every time they come up, it's always a sports story. But
that's what I thought too. But I apparently they're getting into the whatever. I don't care. Deadspin. I don't read them a lot. Left-wing outlet for sure. There's this kid in Las Vegas during this Raiders-Chiefs game on Sunday. He's wearing a Native American headdress, and he's got his face painted half black, half red, as many do in stands at football games. For instance, you go to a Steelers game, you'll see half yellow, half black, right? Or you go to an Eagles game, you'll see people paint half green, half white. Not uncommon. This kid has gone viral by leftists, courtesy of Deadspin. Kid called Holden. I don't know how old he is. Young, like 4th grade or 8th grade or something, like elementary school age kid. Turns out, so Deadspin spins it this way. They get a profile shot of the kid in Native American headdress, and of course the profile shot in the stands is the black side of his painted face. And so Deadspin writes this whole story and gets all this viral click crap about, look at this Kansas City Chiefs kid wearing a Native American headdress in blackface. This story just keeps getting more and more delicious. I've watched it for the last few days. Colin Rugg just tweeted this a little while ago. The young boy labeled as wearing blackface by Deadspin is a kid called Holden Armenta. His mother, Shannon Armenta, confirmed that her son was the one at the middle of the controversy in the Facebook page. Chiefs player saw Holden during the game and decided to join with him in his tomahawk chop. So there are all these cell phone videos of this kid from different angles. Now you're seeing black players, writes Colin Rugg, black players so offended by the, quote, blackface they joined in Holden's chop. And it's been reported now that Holden, wait for it, is part of a direct Native American heritage family. That his father is directly related to a Native American tribe. There's just a special something when you see an outlet like Deadspin just circle the toilet bowl. This is what the online community can do. To my last point, we bring in Cheryl Chumley, not to talk about this necessarily, although I'm sure she has an opinion. She's the online opinion editor at the Washington Times, author of an important book called Lockdown, The Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom. Cheryl, I welcome you in, first of all, and hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Merry Christmas to you.
Thank you. Good morning.
We were just talking in the last segment about the Biden administration effectively threatening, as they always do, TikTok and other social media platforms with allowing people to dare share that they don't think the economy's great. And how, that you talk about a threat to democracy, how troubling it is. This kid, allegedly in blackface, social media saved the reputation of this kid and this family. And in fact, has backfired and made Deadspin look like jackasses. The importance of speech, Cheryl, is my point. Sorry to belabor it. The importance of speech and deliberation in public that social media in its purest form can give us is vital, and it's natural that Democrats want to stop it.
It is, and they're still upset that Elon Musk took over Twitter, right?
Yes.
Because that was their massive tool for the recent presidential election to stifle free speech, to stifle thought. It was the way they seized individual liberties under the coronavirus crazy, booting anybody who had a question or a dissenting viewpoint that the government wanted to put out there. And so now we have Elon Musk with X, and the Democrats cannot stand on their party platform. They can only stand and win elections so long as they disguise their true intents. And of course, they do that by stifling dissenting views.
CNN is suggesting still, falsely, wrongly, and Elon Musk has gone to war over this, Cheryl, that he is some sort of anti-Semite and posting anti-Semitism on his account on X, which we talked about this extensively last week. I think everybody knows the story, but shorthand just in case you don't. Somebody made the point that Western Jews have voted for politics and the party that supports Hamas and supports this kind of terrorism. And this particular poster said, sorry, I have a hard time supporting all these Western Jews who are upset now that their policies are basically coming home to roost, to which Elon Musk said that's a true fact. This makes him an anti-Semite, Cheryl.
Well, it's funny because I've had that very question myself, like a lot of people in America, right, who watch the Jewish population, for example, in New York, constantly vote Democrat. And the Democrat Party stands for such things as free Palestine and river to the sea type of agendas and so forth. And so it's a valid question. And this is just a knee-jerk reaction, though, of the trolls that the Democrats love to scoop up and send out there during campaign and election seasons to do their dirty work. They know that in the Democrat Party, the sheep within the party are low information voters, and all they need to do is put out 52 characters on X, or formerly Twitter, and that gets the anger going. So it's just the way of the Democrats, and I think by and large most Americans are attuned to that.
Yeah, and they have effectively, CNN and others have effectively also scared away large companies from X doing business. That's what they also try to do, is silence not just voices, but they try to chill and freeze revenue streams. Disney, Paramount, Lionsgate, Sony Pictures, Universal, Warner Brothers, Discovery have not posted on X in roughly 10 days. But blackout on X extends beyond these companies. Corporate accounts, in some cases, high-profile accounts affiliated with Disney have gone dark. Late Show with Stephen Colbert shared the news that the host would be off the air due to appendicitis, but have not been active on X, and on and on and on. People pulling their ad buys on X. So, again, it's a full-scale assault on speech that dissents, is the point, right?
It is. And part of the problem, though, and I just want to go back in time and put a little context to this. Part of the problem is even conservatives, right, even free speech advocates in this country failed to recognize the threat. I think it was something like 20 years ago when we first started discussing in this country hate speech. And there were some people that came out and said, what is hate speech in America? The First Amendment doesn't make any mention of hate speech and so forth. And that's a term that could be exploited by the leftists in the Democrat Party to stifle free speech and to censor dissenting viewpoints. And so if you trail back in time to when hate speech was first emerging in the culture and then it became commonplace, that's where all this started in America, that we didn't fight it hard enough early on. And now we're at the point where you can't call a male if a male wants to be called a female, and that's called offensive speech. That's called dangerous speech. So we really have to learn to recognize the signs early on and fight effectively before we get this runaway train that we're facing now.
And as you have written so beautifully in your book, Cheryl Chumley, Lockdown, the Socialist Plan to Take Away Our Freedom, COVID was one of the prime examples of silencing our speech. And now what's so amazing and infuriating, frankly, I'm trying to find a place for that anger still, is all of these people writing all of these stories, much like you point out in your editorial. Hey, locking kids out of school was bad and may have generations of effects for our economy and kids learning and health and mental state. Yeah, they're all saying it like, gee, wow, we've studied this, and it appears that our locking people down was a bad idea, and masks didn't work. It makes thinking people furious, Cheryl.
Oh, very furious, right? Because it's so obvious. When we were going through the whole coronavirus crazy, I was one of those people early on that was pointing out the deceptive narratives of the bureaucrats in government, right? That Anthony Fauci and Bill Gates, for God's sake, Bill Gates of all people, were allowed to stand on these public platforms and tell us that we needed to follow their whims and wishes, which were ever changing, right? Anthony Fauci, he would go on CNN in the morning and say one thing, and then MSNBC in the afternoon and say the complete opposite. And we were supposed to hop, skip, and jump to these dictates. And the left successfully used fear to steal all our individual freedoms, which aren't just guaranteed by the Constitution. They're part of God-given individual liberties that we are all born into in this country. And so, yes, it's very difficult if you are a cooler head person who looks at the actions and pays attention to the rhetoric and then puts it to the light of truth versus lie and sees early on how the Democrats lie just to seize power.
I know there are many in this audience because I've heard from them who hear rumblings coming out of China about, more viral overload there and kids getting ill. And many people believe they're going to try it again. Here it comes again. And so I was having this sort of rhetorical discussion with myself. How many in this country would do it again? How many would lock down? How many would mask up? How many would, vote by mail or whatever? How many would do it again versus how many of us would push back? Healthy pushback another time if they tried it, Cheryl, or no?
Well, I think, and this is why I wrote lockdown as a warning, that there is definitely coming another similar COVID-type fear that the left will use to wield as cause to lock us down again, right? And next time it's going to be with even greater force. And when you ask how many, it's not a question of numbers, right? Mm-hmm. They don't need the majority. They just need a certain key people in position power. And then those people, such as school administrators, right, who are told by the Department of Education and the unions to put kids back in face masks or to go to remote learning. Those people will carry out the wishes of the few. And then if there's any dissent, the left can successfully send out the trolls and the sheep that really make up the bulk of their party, right, the Democrat Party, to express anger and fear and shame and mock and call out anybody who dares dissent with the government bureaucratic view. So you don't need a majority. You only need a few loudmouth people in key spots to force a will of the elites onto the majority.
Cheryl Chumley is the online editor at the Washington Times. Lockdown, the Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom is her book. I hope you read it. It's so important. And one of her most recent pieces is Natural Immunity Proves Better Than COVID-19 Shots. No duh. You don't have to share this with me if you don't want. You don't have to share if you don't want. All right. So please don't take this as some sort of litmus test. I'll share with you first. I was never going to take that shot. I have never taken that shot. No one in my immediate family has taken that shot and won't. And that's my steadfast position. I don't tell anybody else what they should or shouldn't do related to that shot. And I'm only asking you, were you ever inclined? Did you ever feel like, oh gosh, I'd better, or this could be dangerous? Or did you always feel inclined to question it?
Well, I always was inclined to question it, right? Because especially when the lies came out and they said it was safe, it's tested, it's proven to be safe. And that was in its 7 months of development. And I knew that most vaccines take 10, 15, 20 years to go from development to actual market. So it's impossible to claim them safe. And I'll answer your question. I usually tell people when they're asked if they got the shot to to mind your own business.
Yes.
Tell people to mind your own business because that's a private, personal medical decision, right? And in this country, we have medical choice. But I will answer your question, and my answer is no. I never took it. I attended places where it was touted and publicized, like the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where everybody in attendance had taken a shot, and I was one that never took the shot. Never did, never will. My family members never did, never will. And the reason for that is because I don't trust the government on the shots. When they tell us that we have to take something for the good of other people, that right there is a red flag, because in this country we do things based on individual choice, not for the state. But second off, the lies that went along with the shot. And that's something that should be very concerning to every American, regardless of political party.
And I'll say, Cheryl Chumley, what's so evident now is Pfizer and their full tilt campaign enlisting celebrities, athletes, sadly Travis Kelce, and other stars, notable names out there, to push and push and push. Get your flu shot and get your COVID shot at the same time. It's so grotesque. And now it's gone from what was an emergency of public health to a purely commercial. I mean, it's like trying to encourage people to buy an Instapot or something.
And this is what lawyers are for, right?
Yeah.
Every lawyer in America should be seeking clients to sue, right? Big pharma and the government over the mandates for these shots. Military members who are forced to take the shots should be suing, should be having attorneys represent them in the federal authorities. Private sector employees should be suing. I want to see just litigation come out of the woodwork against these shots so it never happens in America again.
Oh, amen. Cheryl Chumley, so good, as you always are. The book, important book, Lockdown, the Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom. And again, this piece, Natural Immunity Proves Better Than the COVID-19 Shots, no duh, at the Washington Times. Cheryl, thank you, as always. A friend of mine sent me a note. He said, Chris, I don't think you totally understand what these Koch brother establishment Republicans see in Nikki Haley. He said, I think you're forgetting what you said she talks best about. And of course I don't. I know what he talks about. I know what he means. Abortion. I've given her credit. Nikki Haley talks better about the subject of abortion than anything. And I will tell you right now, this is something that I don't know how Republicans are going to deal with it. I don't have a solution for you. I'm not castigating people for feeling this way. But let's be honest. I don't know why I'm feeling like today's the day to do this, but let's just be honest. We have a problem in the Republican Party beyond money and fundraising and splintered candidate support. There's a fair number of us that call ourselves pro-life until the Supreme Court did the right thing and overturned Roe versus Wade. And now there are a lot of us who have gotten very wobbly and weak-kneed and panicked because Roe versus Wade was the one thing that we all could galvanize around, rally about, march in Washington about, focus on for decades and decades. Roe versus Wade was the law of the land that made abortion illegal, and we pretended to rally against it until we got our way, and Roe versus Wade was overturned. And now you've got a bunch of Republicans going, oh, crap, oh, good, we're going to get our asses kicked. No, the women hate us. We'll never win again. Oh. And I'm sorry, my threshold for patience with people who have that point of view is very low. Please don't call yourself a pro-lifer and then lament that Roe versus Wade was overturned. Please don't. It's fine if you're not pro-life. It's okay. I'm not mad at you. I disagree with you. I'd rather you just say, listen, I never, ever want abortion to be discussed amongst Republicans. I want to get rid of it. I'm tired of talking about it. I find it distasteful. Clearly, it ticks off women. I don't want to talk about it. And that is a perfectly acceptable thing to say. But please, don't say, well, I'm pro-life, but I'd rather not. Talk about the easy way out. Well, yes, I'd like to eat lean and lose 70 pounds, but it's just fun to eat cake. It's easier that way. So I'm going to keep eating cake. Yeah, I'd like to be a 32-inch waist, but it's like I don't. This is the thing that frustrates me most about this abortion issue. There's a healthy number of Republicans who don't really mean it when they say they're pro-life. They're pro-life verbally, but when it gets uncomfortable and they're challenged with trying to message it or talk about it or defend states' rights on it, they can't do it. They turn into a ball of mush. And so they decide, and I understand it, Nikki Haley's a woman. How about her? She'll talk about it, okay? So my friend is right. I think he's right. I don't disagree. There are a lot of cologne and cufflink Republicans that are like, she'll make this icky issue go away so we don't have to talk about it with women anymore. Do you think that works, Fast Eddie?
Chris, after the last few election cycles, the way I see Republicans behave, or quote unquote pro-lifers behave, yeah. Do I think it works though? No.
Trump's been calling her here's the other thing. Trump's been calling her bird brain, Nikki Haley. I don't know if you've seen that. He's got nicknames for everybody. He's been calling her bird brain. I'm not sure even where that comes from. Half the nicknames I don't even understand. But whatever. Here's the other theory. The big money is pushing Nikki Haley not because they think she's going to win the nomination, but because they think they'll force Donald Trump's hand in choosing her to tackle the abortion issue and join his ticket because he alone, he's already ticked off a lot of pro-lifers. Here's Trump's problem. Trump's ticked off a lot of pro-lifers because everybody knows that Trump, while he has said he's pro-life, do I think it's Trump's, look, it's on the social issues generally, do I think Trump is a social issues conservative? No. Do I think Trump is a fiscal issues conservative? No. But do I think Trump understands that the base of his voters are? Yes. And do I think Trump understands transactional politics? Yes. And do I think he will govern the way his base wants him to? I do. And I don't think we've seen any evidence when he's actually been in office to suggest I'm wrong. Fair? So, two things can be true. Two things can be true. Donald Trump cannot, at his core, be a social issues conservative, but will govern as such if elected because he knows who put him there. And he did. And so the theory goes that the big money is trying to push Nikki Haley into his corner to ameliorate pro-lifers who are mad at Trump and also the never-Trumpers who get nervous about this issue of abortion. The Thurston and Lovey Howell types who think Nikki Haley will more nimbly tackle the issue with women and maybe stave off the angry mobs on the issue of abortion. How do you like that for a theory, Fast Eddie?
Okay, I can understand that. I can follow that. Yep.
You buy it? Will that work? I mean, do you think, so said another way, do you think a Trump-Haley ticket can bring together the never-Trump factions and the pro-Trump factions? Is that the marriage? Is that the splitting the proverbial baby to bring the big money establishment cologne and cufflink, nervous Nelly on abortion people together with the damn the torpedoes, Trump all the way backers? Can that union happen with that ticket? Just asking.
I don't believe it can, only because Nikki Haley is so much she's a huge supporter of money in Ukraine. She's she's all about this.
Well, here's what I know.
Whatever this section of the party is.
Yeah. Here's what I know. Sorry to interrupt you, but here's what I know. If Donald Trump picks her, Donald Trump's base won't say another word about it. They're not going to say, well, now Trump's really screwed the pooch. I'm out. Right? If Trump decides it,
true.
That's it. It won't be a debate anymore. I just don't know that Nikki Haley will bring about all the never-Trumpers. She might. Maybe she's the best guess, but I don't know. Again, Trump's running around calling her bird brain right now. I'm not sure. Speaking of his last pick, this goes right along with what Turley was talking about. Mike Pence. There's another leak from the Gateway pundit. Mike Pence The headline says, trashing former President Trump to special counsel Jack Smith earlier this year in a closed-door testimony. Chief Judge James Boasberg, an Obama appointee, ordered former Vice President Mike Pence to testify before a grand jury regarding January 6th. Jack Smith was present at the grand jury proceeding during Pence's 5-hour testimony in April. According to the leak to ABC News. Now listen to this. Mike Pence told Jack Smith Trump hired a bunch of crank lawyers who espoused, quote, un-American legal theories and almost pushed the country toward a constitutional crisis. Pence said he never saw in the first few days after the election any significant allegations of fraud. Speaking with former counsel Jack Smith, excuse me, folks, sorry about that. Former Vice President Mike Pence offered harrowing details of how, in the wake of 2020's presidential election, Donald Trump surrounded himself with crank attorneys who espoused un-American legal theories and pushed the country toward a crisis, blah, blah, blah. He told investigators he's sure in the days before January 6th, when a violent mob tried to stop Congress from certifying the election, he informed Trump he still hadn't seen evidence of a significant election fraud. But Trump was unmoved, continuing to claim the election was stolen and acting recklessly on that tragic day. Now, this, again, I know you're thinking to yourself, Pence is a traitor, but here's the point in all of this. Do you know what Pence is doing? Much like Sidney Powell did, much like Jenna Ellis did. Here's the point. This is what Turley was saying. All of these people, it may sound like, ooh, they're really trashing Trump. Ooh, they're turning on Trump. Maybe, but it's to save their own hides. What they're all saying also is there was legitimate legal counsel to Donald Trump telling him there was fraud and there was a way to fix it and that he should pursue it. And Trump believed that. And that as long as Trump believed that and was told by legal people that he'd hired that there was a legal remedy to fix the fraud they believed there was, it was not a racketeering issue. There was not a big fraud. There was not a big scheme to overturn an election they knew they lost. Trump was being told, and even Pence, even in that, you may not read it that way, but that's what Turley's saying. Even in that, it says Pence is basically admitting it was never a plot. It was never like Trump said to all these people, I know I lost, but I'm not going. I want to be king forever, and you people are going to make it happen. That's not the way it went down. That's the way it's been spun, but not the way it went down. So, sorry, I've purposely not spent a lot of time on relitigating this stuff too much, but every now and again, I like to touch on it just to remind you where some of you who might be dispirited or worried might be, and those of you that are ready to move on or put it in the rearview mirror or think it's a done deal or a fait accompli for Trump. I like to kind of reset and revisit this as to why I don't think, I agree with Turley, and it's also why I'm motivated to continue to fight. I don't think we should accept the terms of, well, Trump's cooked, he's going to prison, so we may as well move on to somebody else who's left. That's where they want the Trump voter. Well, Trump's going to prison. I guess we may as well surrender and go Haley. Haley 2024. That's what they want us to do. I'm not giving it to them, folks. Sorry, I'm just not. Not me anyway. I won't speak for you, but I'm not. Mike Lindell and MyPillow. What a great patriot. One guy that, for sure, everything he makes, everything he sells, you can guarantee not made in China. Nope. Not at all. Now, look, he does sell a delicious coffee. He obviously is not growing the coffee beans here. So, full disclosure, that's maybe one of the few things at MyPillow that you won't find domestically grown, but certainly packaged and shipped as our MyCoffee or MyPillow and the coffee specifically, the pods, the ground, and the beans. We order them here and drink it at the office regularly. I'm enjoying some this morning, as a matter of fact. The MyPillow products, which I didn't own or possess any of them until this year, to be perfectly candid with you. And Mike and I partnered together to start talking about them, and so I ordered a few things. I ordered the Giza Dream sheets. I ordered that 3-foot body pillow that MyPillow makes. I sleep with it every night. I love it. As a side sleeper, it's the best. I rest my arm and elbow on it and put my knee up on it. It's like it gives great support. if you're somebody that, is a side sleeper like I am. The MyPillow 2.0, here's the deal. You'll get up to 80% just by using my name as a promo code when you go to MyPillow.com and type Chris. But on the MyPillow 2.0 specifically, this is covered in a fabric that's heat dissipating, so it keeps you cooler all night long if you're somebody that kind of runs hot at night. You'll get a second MyPillow 2.0 for free if you use my name, Chris, when you order one. And the mattress topper, which listeners have told me is like reinvigorating your mattress. It's like a brand new mattress at a fraction of the price. Mike's going to ship you that mattress topper for free if you order it. It's also covered in that same 2.0 material to keep you cool all night long. So whether it's the Giza Dream Sheets, the MyPillow 2.0, the mattress topper, the blanket. We just ordered a new waffle woven blanket from MyPillow, and we love it. Dean loves his MyPillow dog bed. Yep, we're MyPillowed out at Stately Stigall Manor, and I hope you'll check it out too with a 10-year warranty and a 60-day money-back guarantee on everything you order. I know you're going to be very, very satisfied with the MyPillow products. It's like a mall online there. Go to MyPillow.com or call 800-932-5056. 800-932-5056, and remember the promo code Chris to save big money. Yesterday, as we were putting the show to bed, an interesting bit of news popped that Hunter Biden wants to go public. Fox News' Howard Kurtz says Hunter Biden has agreed to testify before a Republican House committee on one condition. It has to be in public. Kurtz says, I'm not so sure this is the smartest strategy, and neither apparently do many in the White House. It shines a very bright spotlight on his history of legal problems and drug problems, just when his dad is gearing up his re-election campaign. Politico says this is a long overdue strategy. So who's right? We bring in our chief legal scholar and great friend. He's authored the book A Wordsmith's Work. He's a constitutional attorney himself, former spokesperson for the DOJ, Mark Weaver. Mr. Weaver, I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Welcome in.
I did. Same to you, my friend.
Thank you, buddy. Who's right? Kurtz, that this is a political minefield for Hunter Biden, or Politico, who says, right on, take those SOBs head on, Hunter, good for you?
Yeah, this is like a series of minefields on top of another series of minefields, and he's wanting to jump in there with a pogo stick. That's what this feels like to me. I mean, that same Politico article, this shows you the credibility level of some articles, particularly in Politico, which has a partisan bias. It suggested that PolitiFact has already found that there was nothing unethical in the Hunter Biden laptop. There was no problem in any things that was found in the Hunter Biden laptop. That was smack dab in the middle of that article. Of course that's not true. You'd have to be looking at it with the strangest set of glasses you'll ever buy down at your optometrist to say that there's nothing in those emails and texts, or for that matter, photos, that is troubling or unethical on the Hunter Biden laptop. So I get the sense that Hunter Biden's new lawyer, Abby Lowell, who's a pretty decent lawyer as far as having been experienced with politicians in trouble, that he has used his connections at Politico to put a story out there that he's going to threaten the Congress with Hunter Biden coming to tell them off. And I'm not saying it'll be good for the country, but it will be good for a belly laugh to watch this go down.
Apparently Comer, though, who's the chair of the House Oversight Committee, is turning this down. The subpoena is for a deposition. The panel would be happy to have him publicly testify at some point in the future, but there's apparently a standoff on this thing. Hunter says, no, I want to be out in the air and open and public for everybody to see. And Comer's like, no, we're doing this behind closed doors. So Comer's actually trying to be a little more helpful, I would think, to Hunter Biden here. Why wouldn't Republicans just say, okay, if that's the way you want this to go, we'll do it in public? Why would Comer resist that, you think?
Well, I've got to give high marks to Comer. I think he's approached these issues fairly responsibly over the last several months. I did not know him before he took this chairmanship, but I've watched him as he has. He's doing the right thing here, at least for the good government perspective. Here's why. When there are no cameras, you can't mug for the cameras or hot dog for the cameras or try to show up the questioner for the cameras. It's a little bit like you may know that I have a part-time endeavor as a prosecutor, prosecuting criminal cases. It's a little bit like grand jury. When I get a defendant who wants to come in and testify, I'll say, okay, you can come into the grand jury. It's just me and you and the grand jurors, and you're required to answer all the questions. And after you've given a little speech, I'll look at you again and say, I'll give you one more chance. You're under oath. Answer the question. And so that's the sort of approach you want to take early on in these cases, is to lock in the testimony of the person speaking under oath, or if not under oath, at least they're speaking to federal investigators, and there's legal problems if you lie, even when you're speaking to federal investigators not under oath. They're trying to lock in his testimony, and then later they will probably call him in front of a public hearing, and when he tries to hot dog or tries to prevaricate, they'll be able to point to his previous testimony where he said something.
Mm-hmm. And Hunter says his official position is, I'm not doing anything that everybody can't see out in public because I don't trust you guys. I think you'll manipulate the system behind closed doors, and I won't be there to defend myself, is his official position on this subpoena. So I don't know who ultimately wins this standoff.
Well, he can be held in contempt of Congress for not showing up to talk. At the very least, he can be required to come in and say he submits his Fifth Amendment privilege and will not testify. Now, I don't think he really wants to testify. I think this is a dodge by Abbe Lowell. They want to be able to walk away from Congress and say, listen, we offered to do it. And jeepers, we would have been willing to do it in front of cameras, but they're trying to do it in this very mean way, and we're not going to do that. This gives them the ability to walk away and say we're not going to do it, and essentially dare Congress to hold him in contempt of Congress.
Mark Weaver, a constitutional scholar in his own right, an attorney and former DOJ spokesperson. A Wordsmith's Work is his book. Mark, if I could pivot a little bit to, I try not to belabor this, and in fact, most shows I won't do it anymore, but today I've gotten into it a bit, simply because Turley over the weekend, who I've respected, I think, for most of his analysis throughout Trump's presidency, his impeachment trials, and now post-presidency, I think Turley's been pretty fair, and he's very clearly a Democrat, a Hillary Clinton voter. He's admitted in testimony he is. So he's not sympathetic to Trump, doesn't vote for Trump, but says that this idea that Trump's going to be locked away, people like Christie and certainly Democrats that want to see him locked away, Turley says don't be so sure. And the thing that it all hangs on, and you and I have talked before about these people flipping, quote, flipping on Trump in Georgia. Two things. Number one, Turley thinks that the biggest problem legally Trump faces of all of these indictments is in Florida still. And there's reason to believe that thing may be punted until after the election. Having said that, these people that are trying to avoid their own prosecutions by, providing testimony or whatever, or pleading, what they're all saying is actually not as damaging to Trump as a lot of people are being led to believe. They all seem to be saying the same thing. Trump was given counsel that this election was fraudulent. There is a path to fix this and expose this fraud, and we should pursue it. And Trump believed that was true and continued to say, soldier on. And everybody from Pence to Sidney Powell has said so behind closed doors in testimony. They've never said, none of them have confirmed, Trump knew all along, we all knew all along, he didn't win, and we all plotted to figure out a way to make it look like he won. That's never been said. Is that about right?
I think that is right. What Turley's talking about here is, in law school, you learn the term mens rea, which is Latin for mental state or state of mind. And certain crimes require the defendant to know something. You can't premeditate murder if you didn't know you committed murder. That's an example of mens rea. And so Trump's going to have to make the case, his lawyer's going to have to make the case that either Trump genuinely believed the election had been stolen, which if you believe that, you should be taking action to remedy it, or he was going based on legal advice of lawyers who said, listen, this is a proper legal procedure we're going to file. And Trump, not being a lawyer, goes along like most clients and says, okay, well, if you tell me it's a proper legal procedure, let's go do it. My fear for him being put in jail has always been that some Democrat judge, if he's convicted, is not going to be able to help themselves and not send them to jail. If a jury acquits him, or what the far more likely outcome is in all of these cases, is if the jury hangs. because then he's not going to go to jail because jury's hanging is not a conviction. But that's the likely thing to watch on all these cases, because most juries will be like most of America. Even in a very blue place like Washington, D.C., you still may have one or two people who just kind of like Donald Trump or don't think he's committed a crime. And then the jury hangs, 10-2 or 11-1 or whatever. They can't send him to prison or jail if he's not convicted.
Do you think that this, if in fact this is going where we think it's going, Biden isn't thrown overboard politically and Trump becomes the nominee, is this going to be a tale of two legal fights? I don't know how to say this. This audience does. I don't mean it for this audience when I say this, so don't misunderstand anybody listening here. I know you get it, but we're talking about a vast sea of tens of millions of people in this country who don't follow things closely like we all do. I don't know how to say this. Do they have the bandwidth? Do they have the attention spans, the intellect, quite frankly, to understand the legal storylines for both of these men? I don't know. I don't know that the country's ever gone through something quite like it.
Well, we did. That last thing you said is certainly true. We've never seen anything like this in this country. But even in some of the rough and tumble elections of the early 1800s, which were famous for their mudslinging and meanness, but a lot of this is already baked in. Most people know that Donald Trump has been indicted. It hasn't changed his trajectory in the polls. The left's fever dream has always been, well, the moment he's convicted, that's when everybody will realize that he's the scoundrel that I know he is. That's always been their fever dream. I don't know that that's true. I think people's views about Donald Trump are rather firm. I think most people have had a view of Donald Trump for many years, and it's hard to change people's views. What's interesting is people's views of Biden has been changing because when they watch him degrade mentally, or when they see the economy degrade substantively, that they start thinking, well, this Joe Biden really ought not be around for another term. So a lot of the views are already baked in, I would say.
The public also, I think, is pretty well aware and understands the oldest story in time, selling influence to enrich yourself. And I think most people understand that Hunter Biden is a slime ball, quite frankly, who has a checkered past and was running around collecting money. At a minimum, enriching himself and members of his family on dad's name. At worst, laundering money to dad directly. And I think a lot of Americans understand that storyline. So that's an easy one to tell, too. But I don't want to get out over my skis and lead anybody to believe, much like we were chanting in 2016, lock her up, lock her up. Yeah, Hillary Clinton should go to jail, and Joe Biden and Hunter probably too, if in fact they're guilty of this stuff. But I think we're all kidding ourselves. Are any of these people going to wind up in jail, Mark?
The same thing I mentioned about Donald Trump applies to Hunter Biden. If you get a couple hardline Democrats on the jury, they just simply won't vote guilty because they'll see it as harmful for Joe Biden, or they'll believe the MSNBC line that Joe was just being a good father. His son was down on his luck and drug addicted, and Joe was doing what a good father would do. Most good fathers I know wouldn't have done what Joe Biden did, by the way, but we all love our children. We want to support our children, but we don't get involved in Chinese and other foreign payoff deals to help our children through whatever their difficulties are. In court, as a prosecutor, I've always had to prove my case beyond a reasonable doubt. I look at the evidence out there about Hunter Biden influence peddling and money connecting back to the big guy, Joe Biden. I think there's enough evidence to win that case beyond a reasonable doubt. The problem is, in modern America, you'd have to prove the case beyond a partisan mindset instead of beyond a reasonable doubt. People bring their feelings about politics into the courtroom. And it may be difficult to convince a hardcore Democrat that Hunter Biden, in fact, was involved in a payola scandal that Joe Biden was getting money and kickbacks from.
Mark Weaver, I'm not asking you to endorse any candidate here, Trump or otherwise. I'm just simply asking from the point of view of what I know are probably many in this audience who say Trump's been, he's got 91 counts. There's a lot of people that believe that some judge's going to try to put him in jail. We just don't need this. as a country, as a party. Let's go with a proven leader who's not being threatened with jail. And let's go with DeSantis, or let's go with Haley. I know there's a healthy number of people in the Republican ranks who feel that way, and I respect it. But I wonder if you think from a legal perspective, is that your attitude? Well, Trump's probably cooked, so it would be best for Republicans to look elsewhere. I'm saying legally. I'm not asking you to personally tell me how you feel about any of these candidates on the Republican side.
Legally speaking, it is a cleaner chance for a conservative to run the executive branch for the next 4 years, to elect somebody who does not have a Democrat judge with the keys to the jailhouse in her hand or his hand. That's always been my great fear, is that even if I mentioned you need to convict Trump to send him to prison, that's certainly true. But if Trump says something during one of these trials that the judge doesn't like, and if the judge is really worried that Trump might be the next president, you could see that judge, particularly the one in Washington, saying, you know what, you're in contempt. I'm going to send you to jail for the next 10 days. That's what I fear, is that they won't be able to help themselves. And so legally speaking, someone like Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis are the two you mentioned, and they're the two most likely. They don't have that threat, and they have a much cleaner shot of being in the White House and staying in the White House without having a Democrat judge affect their future.
So there is credibility, you think, then, to people making the argument it's a cleaner, safer path to nominating somebody like Ron DeSantis?
Well, I think that's undeniable, and you asked me to make the legal case.
That's right.
I could make the political case as well, but on the legal side, that's just undeniable.
Yeah.
That somebody who doesn't have legal woes hanging over their head that will distract them. Remember, you have to be in court during a criminal trial. You must be. That's required. The trial cannot go forward without the presence of the defendant in a criminal case. And so Trump's going to get elected, and then he's going to have to take some time away from running the executive branch to go sit in a courtroom down in Florida about the documents case for several weeks on end. Remember, where the prosecution can keep it going by just calling more witnesses and can keep him there for several more days.
And he cannot then, as president, newly elected president, say, I'm done with this and take himself out of it? I mean, he can't decree that as the chief executive, or he has to still play along with Jack Smith?
He must play along. No one is above the law. And so every defendant in a criminal case would like to say, you know, Judge, I have something much more pressing today.
But
does 3 years from now work for you?
Pardoning, so that the pardon power only comes after conviction, is that a fact? You can't, like if you're on trial as a president.
No, that's it's not been tested, but Richard Nixon was pardoned by Gerald Ford without ever being charged with anything, and that was not challenged by anybody. So I think most constitutional scholars presume that you can be pardoned whether you've been convicted or not. But remember, a president can only pardon for federal offenses, and in Georgia, at least, he's looking at allegations of state offenses.
But if it's a hung jury in Georgia, I know I'm doing a lot of what ifs. I'm trying to talk myself through this. If it's a hung jury in Georgia, Trump could show up in the White House after having won, let's say, just pretending, and he could say, Jack Smith, middle finger, I pardon myself. And maybe we'd have a big, constitutional fight all the way to the Supreme Court over it, but he could declare that, yes?
Yeah, I think so. I think, and you, by the way, you could see him doing that.
Oh, sure, yeah.
You see him doing that. I issue a complete and total.
I did it beautifully.
Donald J. Trump.
Yeah.
I could just see the ceremony he does it. Yeah. Right? But it's an interesting thing. You know what? I want to tell you, I talked to a lot of reporters and hosts. Chris, no one has ever asked me that question. That's a smart question. Could Donald Trump as president say, you know what? I look at the Constitution and think that the power to pardon includes state crimes, and I therefore pardon myself of that. And there would have to be months and months of legal review about that, because just the fact that it's not been done before doesn't mean it can't be done. Pardoning of a non-charged president had never been done before, but Gerald Ford went and did it. And so I think that's a smart question, and I think that's certainly within the range of possibility.
And probably what he's thinking, very similar to certifying the 2020 election. You know, people like Mike Pence, I do think Mike Pence is an honest guy. I don't think he's a saboteur. I think he would have liked to have seen another term. I think he genuinely believed Trump was wrong, that there was something constitutionally that allowed him not to certify that election. But there are others who firmly believe Pence was well within his right, Congress was well within their right, and should have sent those things back to the states to recertify. That is still not settled constitutionally, is it, that argument?
It's not, and that there is the law has been since changed. There was a law in the books from many decades earlier that it wasn't very clear whether the vice president's role was one, we call it ministerial, ceremonial, just count the votes, or substantive. I check the votes of Pennsylvania and I see a problem because Article 7, Section 14 of the Pennsylvania Constitution says mail-in ballots are not appropriate. So there was an argument about whether his role was one of just counting them or checking them. That has since been resolved. But your point is well taken that because it was an open question, there were legal steps that could be made. Now, the left has fulminated, well, no, any lawyer who said that, let's try to disbar them because how dare they have that view of the statute. Every day in courtrooms across America, lawyers offer challenging views on statutes, and they don't get disbarred for it. But in this case, there's a whole effort to disbar those people who advance that.
Are we a healthier country? Final question, Mark Weaver. Are we a healthier country for having debates like, can a guy who wins the presidency pardon himself of a crime? Are we healthier for, can a guy who believes there's real credibility questions about certifying the election, should we challenge that and send it back to the states? Are we better for having discussions about what the Constitution does and doesn't say about these things?
Yeah, you've known me for a long time, and you know that I'm a big believer in free speech. The founders, the hand of God was working through the founding fathers in that sacred room in Independence Hall in Philadelphia in 1787. And when they set forth this Constitution, they were trying, and later in 1789 with the Bill of Rights, they were trying to make the point that speech, open debate, is what gets you away from violence, because people have strong feelings, and when you don't let them talk about it, their only other way of affecting change will be violence. And so that's why freedom of speech is one of the unalienable rights that our Creator gave us, and it's recognized in the First Amendment. So yes, I'm a big fan of we ought to be able to have a debate. Beautifully said. And that's, when you start locking people up, rounding people up, accusing them of being criminals simply for having a different point of view, you get violence. And I still believe there are people agitating for it at this hour. They would like to see people get violent as to further the cause that their opposing side is dangerous and has to be dealt with, by rounding them up and locking them up. That's the cynical point of view. Anyway, Mark Weaver, your analysis, wonderful. We always value it. I'm so grateful for it. Thank you, my friend.
The Chris DeGaulle Show podcast.